Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I wanted to talk a little bit about the vote I just took here with regard to our Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, who is now the new Secretary, or no, on his way to becoming the new Secretary. You know, what I've tried to do when looking at nominees is I typically kind of look at three different questions. Do they have the experience for the job? Experience necessary for the job? Do they have views that I believe will help the country, and in particular, help my state? And do they care about the people they will be impacting? So that's kind of a bit of a three-part test. I've tried to work with a lot of the new nominees in the Biden administration. I've voted for a number of them, most of them. As a matter of fact, I introduced Secretary Austin at his confirmation hearing. I got to know him many years ago as a Marine when he was an Army officer, two-star general. And, you know, I will say some of my friends, colleagues, constituents back home are saying, hey, Senator, you know, when the Trump administration put forward their nominees, you usually had kind of a party line vote with a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, my Democratic friends who were just no, 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 no. Why don't you do that? Well, I don't think it's good for the country. That's why I don't do that. I'm against some, but have been supportive of many. And I'm not sure the way in which it worked with the previous administration was best for our nation. So certainly the Secretary Vilsack passes the first two parts of that test I was talking about. Clearly has the experience. Heck, he was the Secretary of Ag for 8 years under President Obama and Vice President Biden, and certainly has views, particularly with regard to farm countries. Saw the strong vote he had there with regard to helping the ag sector. I'm sure he's a patriot, of course, cares about our country. But it was the third question. Do they care about the people they will be impacting that I have some and have had some serious hesitation on? Mr. President, I'll talk a little bit about, you know, a lot of our different economies throughout the country, our states, have been hit hard by this pandemic. And I would say that my state's economy has been hit really hard, really hard. When you look at what drives a lot of the Alaska economy, the energy sector, oil, gas, mining, the tourism sector, the fisheries, commercial fishery sector. I like to call Alaska the superpower of seafood. Over 60% of all seafood harvested in America comes from the waters of the great state of Alaska. Most sustainable, best managed fishery probably in the world, but a huge driver of our economy. And also the issue of access to our lands. 66% of Alaska's federal lands. We need access to help have a strong economy. It's an issue the presiding officer probably don't have to worry about being from Connecticut, but in Alaska, access to lands is huge. In the last administration, we made a lot of progress on these issues for our economy, on oil and gas, ANWR, the NPRA, access to those lands, legislation by the Congress. Our tourism sector had been doing great. Our commercial fishing sector had been doing great. And we even made progress on other access issues like the Tongass, something that for 25 years, Democrats and Republicans, whether senators from Alaska, whether governors from Alaska, trying to get access to those lands. Really important, and we were able to do that. So progress and then the pandemic. And that's hurt everybody, certainly hurt the energy sector, certainly crushed the tourism sector. Last year, Alaska was going to have 1.5 million people show up in our state with regard to tourism, a new record just on cruise ships, just on cruise ships. None of them showed up because of the pandemic. And the commercial fishing sector also has had a really rough time with this pandemic. Markets, international markets, markets domestically. So I'm very concerned about my state's economy, about working families, about the average Alaskan who's struggling right now. And the new policies put forward by this administration have been shockingly negative as it relates to my state. 1 month in, particularly the energy sector. Every day we're waking up to a new edict saying men and women who produce energy in America, who produce energy in Alaska, sorry, you're not favored anymore. You're not viewed in a positive light anymore. It's a real concern. Hundreds, if not thousands of jobs in my state during a recession are at risk. So these were some of the issues that I raised in my discussions with Secretary Vilsack. In particular, our commercial fishing sector. In the previous administration of the USDA, the Secretary of Agriculture helped implement a new trade relief program for fishermen. Huge progress, hugely important. Just the way the farmers were getting this kind of relief with regard to trade and markets that have been destroyed by the pandemic, the Secretary of Agriculture undertook a new program for the farmers of the sea, for the fishermen who are being negatively impacted the same way that our farmers on the land were. This is an issue that I raised with the Secretary on the importance of moving forward, continuing that. And to be honest, Mr. President, there didn't seem to be a lot of interest. I was kind of shocked, but there didn't seem to be a lot of interest, and I was concerned. I am concerned. Similarly, this progress we made with regard to the Tongass, access to the largest national forests in the country that's under USDA management, something Alaskans have been working on in a bipartisan way for 25 years. Didn't seem to be a lot of interest from the Secretary on that either. So these are two issues hugely important to my state, hugely important to my constituents, hugely important to try to get Alaska out of a really deep recession where a lot of families are worried. And I got the sense that the Secretary just wasn't that interested. And I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. So I plan on trying to work with him. You know, he had a strong, very strong bipartisan vote, but every now and then, if you really think the people you represent are not going to be given a lot of attention when they need it, it becomes a harder vote. It becomes a harder vote. He's obviously got strong bipartisan support, but I sure hope that when he becomes Secretary of Agriculture, he cares as much about the farmers of the sea, where we've made progress on, as he does about farmers on the land. And I didn't see that in my meeting with him, and I hope I'm wrong, and that's why I voted the way I did, and also voted the way I did as it relates to this issue of access to the Tongass. Again, a huge issue for my state, a very bipartisan issue for my state, and again, I hope that the Secretary and his team look at it as something that can help the economy of Alaska while protecting our environment, which of course we care about. But these are the reasons that I voted the way I did, and I hope that my concerns are going to be proved to be unfounded, and I'm going to continue to advocate for my constituents in a way that I think is going to be very important as we try and get through these challenging times, particularly the Alaska economy. I yield the floor.